Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching PlainSpeak with me, Shivani Gupta. Big relief and vindication for Narendra Modi-led BJP government at the centre. One of the Prime Minister's first big decisions was demonetisation in his first term. That came in November 2016. And it has been one of the biggest talking points still. Experts differ on the merits and the successes of DeMo till today. But when it comes to legal scrutiny, the move has passed in flying colours. The Supreme Court today delivered a 4-1 judgment on a bunch of over 50 petitions challenging demonetisation. A 5-judge constitution bench of the apex court upheld the validity of the centre's decision to demonetise 500 and 1,000 rupee currency notes. The majority held that the centre's move was valid and satisfied the test of proportionality. Court said their interpretation of the RBI Act, which was called upon question, is pragmatic and not pedantic. It also added, decision-making process cannot be faulted merely because the proposal in this case emanated from the centre. This was one of the big arguments of the petitioners. SC also made another key observation, that it cannot supplant the wisdom of the executive with its own wisdom. In other words, in this case, the courts cannot interfere with the executive's powers. There was one dissenting judgment too, which rendered the process by which demonetisation was done illegal, even though even this judgment called the process when intentioned. The BJP, of course, has claimed vindication of the move and its intentions. The Congress has accepted the judgment but emphasised on the minority one, saying that it brings out the distinction between the powers of Parliament and the limited power of the government of the day. The big question is if the political fight and barbs over DeMo will now stop, or will the charges against the government continue, including a charge that demonetisation was a scam, as we have seen despite judgments in other cases as well. We'll take that question to our guests in just a bit. Breaking down the top highlights of today's important judgment first up, the Supreme Court has said that the notification of November 8 is not hit by unreasonableness. As I mentioned, it passes the test of proportionality. On the issue of the RBI Act and the centre's power in this regard, the Supreme Court has said the centre can take decision after consulting the regulatory board, and that records show that there was consultation between the centre and the RBI for over 6 months before the decision was taken. Importantly, court also noted that restraint is needed before interfering in matters of economic significance. The court cannot supplant such views with the judicial one. In other words, the decision being the executive's economic policy cannot be reversed. This is the executive's domain, and they are judged on it by the public. The court further added, as far as hardships is concerned, it is not relevant if the objectives of demonetisation were achieved or not, but it also added that there was indeed a reasonable nexus within the objectives sought to be achieved, which were removing fake currency and bringing out black money amongst others. As I mentioned, important to note the dissenting judgment here too. Justice B.V. Nagaratna has said that while centre government has the power to demonetize all series of currency notes, but the same can be done through the way of a legislation or by way of an ordinance. This is what was done in the past when demonetisation was done in India twice. So the judge here differed in the manner in which DeMo was conducted. So take a look at the arguments from the petitioners, what they were and what the court has now eventually decided. What the petitioners said first and foremost was that the objectives of the government were false and unmet. So to this, as I mentioned, the court has observed that it is not relevant to the legality test of demonetisation whether their objectives were achieved or not. The petitioners also argued the central board was not given adequate time. They're talking about the RBI here. The court, of course, mentioned that the record shows that consultations happened, and these happened for over 6 months. What the petitioners also said that the move was against Section 26(2) of the RBI Act. The Supreme Court has observed that this November 8 notification isn't hit by the touchstone of unreasonableness. The government cannot initiate any proposal on legal tender. That was the biggest argument, as I mentioned, that it cannot be done on the centre's insistence or by the centre. But the court has very importantly, and this could have far-reaching consequences as far as the RBI Act is concerned, that there is a power to the centre under the RBI Act and it cannot be restricted. What petitioners have also said is that the due process was not followed by the government. The Supreme Court has observed that this notification passes the test of proportionality. In fact, the Supreme Court had even noted that in 1978, for example, the last time demonetization was done, the number of days given to exchange currency was much less than the time that was given in 2016. So it cannot be said that enough time was not given to the public. So the big debate that's coming up after this big DeMo win for the centre, will the politics on this issue stop? Is this now the final word?
After examining the record, we have found that the decision-making process cannot be flawed, merely because the procedure has emanated from the central government.
आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण फैसला आया है। नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार के ऐतिहासिक फैसले, जिसमें 500 और 1000 के नोट को डिसर्कुलेट किया गया, डिमोनेटाइज किया गया था, उसकी वैधानिकता को चुनौती देने वाले सारे याचिकाओं को अस्वीकार करना।
Majority Supreme Court verdict deals with a limited objective, limited issue of the process of demonetization, not with its outcome.
For the proper purpose, there has to be a reasonable.
Guest joining us on the show, Aparajita Sarangi is BJP MP, Advocate Mahima Singh from the Congress Party, Sanya Talwar is editor Law Beat, Yogendra Kapoor is an economist, and Vikas Gupta is also a lawyer. I thank all of you for your time. Let me begin with Mahima Singh. Mahima Singh, isn't the Congress clutching two straws when it is saying that the judgment was not on the outcomes but on the process? You did challenge the process. The Congress couldn't make its arguments. I'm saying Congress because, one of your noted former union ministers is was one of the lawyers for the petitioners. So why not just accept that the questions that were raised on demonetization were unfounded? The Supreme Court has indeed thrown all of those questions out on all the 9 issues, later the 7 issues that were decided to be discussed in this regard.
Good evening, Shivani, and good evening all. Mr. Jairam Ramesh has rightly called demonetization as a singularly disastrous decision of this government. And I will rather uphold that. While the Supreme Court has not really upheld demonetization, it may have upheld or endorsed the legality of the process involved therein. Because if you look at the objectives, even one dissenting judge, Ms. Nagaratna, has indicated towards, how it could have been legally done. And that was the same problem with the farm laws. That was the same problem with the GST, as if the demonetization...
But farm laws and GST were passed by Parliament. How can you compare the two?
No, farm laws were brought in, by an ordinance in the midst of a pandemic, how it was done by a backdoor entry. Everybody knows that. While there was no secrecy involved therein. While demonetization could have been done by ordinance or, the other parliamentary options, as the dissenting judge has also indicated, I would say that Mr. Arun Jaitley had refused to give, clarity on whether was he informed or not. If you recollect back then, late Mr. Arun Jaitley, when an RTI was put, even he had refused to give clarity on that.
But Mahima, what I'm saying is that isn't it time for the Congress party to move on? We've discussed and debated this for 6 years. There is a judgment that has come. P. Chidambaram, your noted, congressman, has himself said that once this judgment has come, we have to accept it. Of course, he has gone on to highlight the minority judgment as well. But, this is how judgments are. Now, to continue to say that something was wrong, this was not right, that was not right, is that fair? You have to ultimately stop somewhere.
Mr. P. Chidambaram has categorically said that Supreme Court has not upheld the process, the objectives of the demonetization or what demonetization...
But the objectives could never have been, they could never have been through the Supreme Court.
Only the legal process. Today,
so that is what was under challenge.
Today, the cash in circulation, Shivani, is 72%.
No, I'll come to that later. My question is that even P. Chidambaram is saying that once the court has given the judgment, that's the law. So we have to accept it. Of course, you can look at the minority judgment and say that there is something to be cautioned here. But my question to you is, you cannot now continue to raise questions on the process.
We will continue to raise questions on what it has done to the country, this singularly disastrous decision. We will continue to raise questions on the ways of this government, unconstitutional, tyrannical ways of this government.
No, but Mahima, the court is saying it wasn't unconstitutional. It was certainly not tyrannical. I'm not understanding why the Congress is saying that we'll continue to say so. Then what's the point of going to the Supreme Court and actually, knocking on their doors if you're not going to accept their verdicts?
We are not living in a majoritarian world.
This is not majoritarian. This is something that has gone through the Supreme Court.
You're talking about the majority. You are not taking into account the one dissenting judge's words who has maintained that the...
But this is how judgments are delivered. If you're saying that only a unanimous judgment can be accepted, then I don't know, we live in a very different political, jurisdictional world.
We are not saying we are not accepting it. We are saying that we are accepting that it only endorses legality of...
but that's what I'm saying. On the process itself, how can you continue to say that this was unconstitutional when the court has not deemed it so? Let me take that to some of our other guests as well. Aparajita Sarangi is joining us. The question though still remains. Politically, yes, elections have been won by the BJP post-demonetization. We've seen massive victories for you. Now, legally, it has passed the legal test, especially on the process as well. But there are questions that several raise on its objectives and whether they were met. Isn't it the responsibility of the government to really, truly tell the public what was achieved by demonetization?
A very good evening. At the outset, I must say that Honorable Supreme Court has upheld the decision of the central government, which was pronounced on 8 November 2016, of demonetizing currency notes of 500 rupees and 1000 rupees denominations. And Congress, of course, is in the habit of putting a question mark on every intention and action of Prime Minister Modi's government. So I don't think anybody in the country today is surprised with the approach of the Congress towards the decision of the Supreme Court. Now, as far as the achievements of demonetization are concerned, please give me some time to actually put forth before you the achievements.
Yes.
In fact, see, there is some kind of a thought that currency in India has increased more than 70% during these 6-7 years of demonetization. But this is not right. This is not to be seen from this particular angle. See, there are two things. Rise in currency in circulation in absolute numbers, one. And number two, currency in circulation in payment systems. What we intended to do was to bring down currency in circulation in payment systems. In absolute numbers, maybe, it may be crossing 70%. But as far as in payment systems is concerned, I must tell you, I would like to give you the figure. It was 88% in financial year 2015-16, and it has become 20% in 21-22, and it is estimated to go down further to 11.15%.
No, but this was not a stated objective of demonetization.
Of course, this was
Aparajita Sarangi, this was not a stated objective of demonetization. The fact that people will use digital transactions was something it's a happy aftermath of demonetization, and I have nothing against it, but not a stated objective.
I tell you, the overall objectives were to combat the menace of fake money, terror financing, black money, and tax evasion.
Yes.
And there is greater transparency definitely now, as well as increase in tax compliance. Collections and filings, that shell companies to the tune of 238,000 have been struck off. I think this is one of the major achievements, number one. And number two, let me tell you that this financial year 21-22, rupees 84 lakh crore transactions, rupees 84 lakh crore have been actually transacted on the United Payment Interface. So I think let us look at the achievements from a very, I would say, from a clean mind.
Okay.
And if we think that, anything that Prime Minister Modi's government does is fraught with faults, I think this we cannot help.
Was that basically the reason why demonetization was dragged through this legal test? Let me take that question to Yogendra Kapoor, who's an economist joining us. There are, of course, differing opinions, Mr. Kapoor, on how good demonetization was, whether we could have achieved some of the objectives without going through the hardships and doing this kind of a process by which 80% of the currency became void in one go. But do you believe that ultimately the questions on the processes, the questions otherwise on the RBI Act, the powers of the center, etc., they were more born out of politics over this issue?
Right. First of all, I would like to say that it was a well-intentioned long-term reform policy brought about by the government. If we look at the very objectives, pre-demonetization, cash used to be considered as an asset or a king. Today, if you look at cash, it is considered more as a liability in the economy. Now, if you see that what were the main objectives of this government in order to start from demonetization, the very objectives of the Modi government were to bring about digitization in this country. And for that, demonetization was step one in that direction. Because if you look at the series of steps that were taken thereafter, we look at the focus of the government was opening on the bank accounts. Then we see that there were financial and taxation reforms in the form of GST. So basically, the transformation of economy doesn't take place in a day. It requires a series of steps. And of course,
but Mr. Kapoor, has the transformation taken place on the very objectives of demonetization is still a relevant question to ask. For example, the issue of how much black money was brought into the system. I'm not saying that it was recovered, but if black money came into the system and people paid tax on it, that is also a good, I think, a good happening as far as the economy is concerned. The money that was untraceable became traceable. But for example, fake currencies, counterfeit currency or other issues, do you think it had an impact?
Definitely. The point is that ultimately, how do you bring about a change in the economy in terms of, curbing the fake money, fake currency menace, as well as the terrorist financing menace? I think these are one of those steps in that direction that only can bring about, the clean money to come into the banking system.
Okay. Let me go across to the other lawyers who are also joining us on the panel. Vikas Gupta, I ask you the same question that I asked the Congress representative. Will it not look bad on the Congress party's part to continue to go to courts, get a judgment, but then refuse to really honor the judgment in letter and spirit? Let's face it, the court has ratified the demonetization step. It has acknowledged the center's power therein, and it has also talked about the intentions. The fact that the court has also not doubted the intentions of the government. This is a big win. This is a win-win for the Modi government. The Congress has to accept it.
Shivani, as far as the legality is concerned, it may be a big win for the BJP, for the central government. Of course, the courts have said that there's nothing illegal about it, and economy is the sole domain of the executive and the parliament. And they don't want to transgress. Since there is separation of power, they don't want to interfere with the economy of the country. But most importantly, whether the objectives have been achieved or not, my learned senior economist has said that cash was a liability, is a liability now. If that is a liability, then from how 17 lakh crore CIC way back in 2015 before the demonetization, it is now more than 32 lakh crores currency in circulation. So I don't think whether the objectives, as far as the legality is concerned, I think that debate must come to an end. But as far
so
as
I'm sticking myself to that because I think the aftermath or one second. No, I'll give you more time. My point is, Vikas, that the impact of demonetization, I think we can continue to judge it. There will be a 5-year judgment, a 10-year judgment. You can look back after 15 years as well. But I'm sticking to the process and the legality. That was the challenge here. The Congress cannot on one hand say we accept the judgment and then say, no, this was unconstitutional.
No, Shivani, as far I am in full agreement with you. As far as the legality and the process is concerned, we must accept that the Supreme Court has given its verdict. Supreme Court has not given its verdict as far as objective is concerned. The politics should and must go on
on the objectives. Okay, fair enough. And I don't think the Supreme Court could have sat on judgment on the objectives anyways. These objectives cannot be quantified in the manner that, let's say, you need a judgment on. It cannot be done like that. But Sania Talwar, also go across to you.
Debated by the politicians and by the economists.
Exactly. It will be debated more in the public realm, the political realm. It will be something that the public will vote on and debate on and discuss and possibly decide on. This isn't really a legal matter that can be debated.
And the economists also.
And the economists as well. Sania Talwar, what according to you is going to be the larger impact of the judgment that has come in today vis-a-vis the RBI Act and the powers that the center, the court has acknowledged of the center to have, and secondly of the domain that it has appreciated when it comes to economic policy. Now, you and I can all argue till the cows come home whether our economic policy is good or bad, but the courts don't have jurisdiction there. That's the jurisdiction of the elected government.
Absolutely, Shivani, and I think that's one of the significant aspects of this judgment that need to be thrusted upon more than the politics of it that are going on about the impact of the demonetization, etc. As you rightly pointed out, I mean, that is something that will always be debated. But when we're looking at the transgressions that we often speak about and we often debate about, separation of powers that we often look at, I think it is very significant from that point of view. From my thought process, I genuinely feel that it's a very good judgment. It's a very, very welcoming judgment because it is looking at what is the domain of the judiciary, what is the domain of the parliament, what is the domain of the executive. So from that perspective, it is relied on a number of precedents also, and it's really shed some good light on these aspects of separation of powers. So yeah, from that point of view, it says that, the will of the people is something that is significant here. And the people who are in the parliament, who are in the executive, are the people who are going to be representing them. And the policies that they make are something that the parliament and the executive will be responsible for. So it is not something we will be commenting on. I think that is very significant. It may have very large ramifications, and it's good for our country.
Yeah, but overall, what do you make of the arguments that are still flowing in today that the judgment is not on the objectives? So therefore, it is in ways a part win for the government. The judgment is only on the process, although I must mention the objectives were very much brought into the arguments as well. And the court put them aside and said that you cannot judge the policy on the outcomes alone. Your thoughts?
I think when you're looking at the objectives, the court has in fact pointed it out. Even the dissenting view, Justice Nagaratna has specifically said that the objectives cannot be questioned. The government's objectives cannot be questioned. The impact of it is something that is something we can't get into and we can't really analyze, considering the complexities of the issues that persist. But it's not really questioned the objective of the government. That's my view, at least.
Okay. Let me bring back Mahima Singh, who wanted to come in on the issue of the objectives itself. I asked Aparajita Sarangi whether the objectives were truly met or not is a matter of debate even today. Mahima.
A very categorical phrase I want to bring up here from Justice Nagaratna's view is that, Shivani, she says that it is as desired by the central government and not in consultation with the RBI. And apart from that, she's also mentioned RBI should have independently recommended demonetization through advice of government. These are two things that I wanted to bring out from Justice Nagaratna's judgment excerpt. Apart from that, I already pointed out to 72% rise in the cash in public, and the BJP already, has their explanation of it in their own.
No, but I think Ms. Sarangi answered that. She's saying that cash in circulation is not cash being used in transactions. It may be in people's bank accounts.
So then let me come down to cash to GDP ratio. She doesn't want to talk about cash to GDP. They say ideally it should be 10% anywhere in the world. It was in 2017, it was 8.7%, which was good. But then, it bounced back to 13.7% in, 2022. So, and if you look at the table of it, you will find out the discrepancies therein. And then the GDP decline, Shivani, you have to look at it. They have been hiding behind the pandemic. Let me say that in 2017, immediately after the demonetization, it fell down steeply to 6.8%. Then it came to 8.3% in 2000. It was 8.3% in 2016, 6.8% in 2017, then 6.5% in 2018. 3.7% in 2019, mind you, pandemic was nowhere to be seen at that point in time. And I'm not even going to the minus 6.6% during the pandemic, which was actually
So you were saying this decline was purely because of demonetization?
Demonetization, and then the next flawed step of GST. You know, they were clubbed together. And one has to remember, you were talking about the money being traceable, Shivani. Let me say that the 99.3% of demonetized banknotes were deposited back. So which traceable money are we talking about?
This money only, the one that came into bank accounts.
So that was, where is the black money? You know, we were talking about the black money, and the BJP spokesperson had a lot to say about it. Let me say that the money stashed in Swiss banks is at a 14-year high. It is at 30,500 crores. Let the BJP spokesperson answer that.
Okay.
Where is that?
Aparajita Sarangi, answer those questions, because these are still very much questions up in the air. The cash to GDP ratio, the impact that demonetization had on the economy, was it truly worth it? Could you have achieved your notable objectives some other way? What was the ratio of fake currency? I think it was 0.007. So what was achieved then at the end of it?
So it's very unfortunate that it seems that Congress is putting a question mark on the judgment of Honorable Supreme Court. Honorable Supreme Court has upheld the decision. I would also say the process of decision, as you are saying. Okay, I agree. It's a process of decision that they have upheld. But as far as the achievements are concerned, the objectives having met with are concerned, I can only say that it is for all to see. See, there has been a long-term positive impact on multiple sectors. And through this, we have tried to bring about systemic and behavioral changes in the system. Paper-based instruments, we are all aware of this, paper-based instruments such as check, etc., has declined from 46% in financial year 2015-16 to 12.7% in FY 21-22. I think this is just one example. The other one, which I would like to reiterate, very important to have transactions through the United Payment Interface, very high number of transactions worth 84 lakh crore rupees in the last financial year. And even
all of that is okay. Digitization has indeed been a success of the government. Nobody thought that India could adopt digitization and mobile payments at the rate that we have done. I am not taking anything away from that. Let's focus on black money, for example. Mahima had raised a specific question on black money stashed abroad. Why not one strike on that too?
See, I give you a figure. Rupees 10 lakh crore was wiped out of circulation overnight after the announcement of 8th November 2016. So I think let us look at it positively. Let us see, analyze as to what has been done. The economy is not so very bad, even post-COVID, even post, or rather during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We are better off than many other countries.
You're shifting now. Let's focus on demonetization and its impact. Mahima wants to come in, then you respond. Yes, Mahima, 30 seconds, please.
Why does she only want to focus on, why does the BJP only want to focus on the positive outcomes and not what the MSMEs and those who were digitally unskilled have suffered when they brought them to their knees? 30,500 crore rupees of black money stashed in Swiss banks, ma'am. And you're not talking about the cash to GDP ratio. You're not talking about the declined GDP. You talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, and you want us to talk in perspective with that about everything negative that's happening. But for positive, for everything positive that's happening, rather when we talk about the decline and the widening ratio, you don't want to talk about how is it happening abroad. When the GDP,
I have final minutes left. Let her respond.
Yeah, the GDP, when your GDP rises, it's rising elsewhere also after the pandemic. But you don't talk about the decline after demonetization.
Can I come in, Shivani?
Yes, please come in, Ms. Sarangi.
A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So Congress will not be convinced because it wants to retain the same opinion. But the fact remains that 6 years have passed. 2016, 2022. They were in power for 70 years. What did they do? So it's always better to, look at things positively. And I tell you, development is a process.
Unfortunately,
When we want to have systemic and behavioral changes in the economy, it would take time. Demonetization is a major step of Prime Minister Modi government. And I think let's wait and watch. Whatever has been done so far, I think need accolades and need approbation.
Okay.
And need a big
I have the economist on the panel, so let me just give him a word. Let me give him a word because I think he can maybe explain it to the viewers. On black money, sir, what is your opinion? Was it able to flush out black money or at least force people to deposit what was untraceable income into bank accounts, take some, pay taxes on it, even take one of the schemes that the government had announced post demonetization, that if you announce your earlier, income that you haven't given taxes on, do it now. Some sort of scheme was announced. And on issue of terror funding, I think on terror funding, I believe the judges were in agreement that it did break the back of terror funding and they have not questioned that objective. But black money is the issue that is still debated because most of the cash has come back and the cash to GDP ratio, as the Congress is saying, is at its highest.
See, I would say that the biggest achievement of demonetization is the change in mindset of the people it has been able to bring about. The very fact why I say that cash today is considered as more a liability is from that perspective, from holding it. If you have, generated it from illegitimate or unaccounted sources, because the government has now tapped all the loopholes to ensure that only legitimate cash only gets into the bank account and illegitimate cash doesn't get absorbed anywhere in the economy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will leave it at that. We'll wait and see if, of course, as far as the objectives are concerned, the debate continues. But one thing is for sure, and it serves nobody's purpose to keep dragging it on, the process and the action itself cannot be questioned anymore, especially after 6 years of a rigorous judicial test. I thank our guests for joining us.